A multi-stakeholder United Nations Summit, the World Summit on the Information Society Forum 2021 was initiated in January and will culminate in the final week held from the 17th to the 21st of May. Representing the largest gathering of the ICT for Development community globally, WSIS provides a platform for those using information and communication technologies to promote sustainable development, highlighting the role of the WSIS action lines to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So far, over 10,000 participants have joined in over the 120 virtual workshops featured, directly through Zoom, through Facebook Live, or other applications. Shaped through more than 500 inputs and suggestions received from our stakeholders during the open consultation process, the agenda of the WSIS Forum features a weekly program with exciting workshops and sessions based on thematic areas deemed as important by our stakeholders. We're delighted to see well-balanced contribution in terms of geographical location, gender balance, and stakeholder type, which has shown the positive commitment towards the WSIS process and the strengthening of the WSIS implementation of activities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The agenda and program of the WSIS Forum cover all the action lines and are aligned with the SDGs. Some of the thematic areas addressed, known as special tracks, include ICTs and gender mainstreaming, ICTs and older persons, ICTs and accessibility for persons with disabilities and specific needs, cybersecurity, and many more, all of which are available on the 2021 WSIS Forum website. The WSIS Forum 2021 also features a high-level track, which gathers high-level representatives from various sectors with ministers, deputies, ambassadors, heads of regulatory bodies, private sector, civil society, academia, and the technical community to discuss the role of ICTs as a means of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and targets. The 2021 WSIS Chairman, His Excellency Mr. Maxime Parshin, and the high-level track facilitators will provide an executive summary of the high-level track outcomes during the final week of the forum, sharing the emerging trends, challenges, and opportunities noted by the diverse group of high-level track facilitators through the course of the high-level policy sessions. The sectoral, regional, and gender diversity of our stakeholders is also displayed in our virtual exhibition space that was inaugurated on March 15th, as well as our various social media platforms. We invite you to follow the WSIS process on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for regular updates and exciting news about the forum, such as the fact that we received a record number of submissions for the WSIS prizes this year, with over 1,270 projects submitted and 1.3 million votes that were cast for the 360 nominated projects. Visit the WSIS Prize website to learn more, with the 18 winners being announced during the 18th of May during the special ceremony. We are also pleased to announce that the WSIS Forum special track on ICTs and older persons will be initiating a special prize this year entitled the WSIS Healthy Aging Innovation Prize. Additionally, in collaboration with the Global Coalition on Aging, WSIS is co-organizing a virtual hackathon. With more than 1,000 registered participants, the hack will continue until April. Hackers had the opportunity to meet with experts in the field of ICTs and aging during the 3 mentorship sessions featured. Stay tuned for the announcements of the 4 winners, decided by a distinct panel of judges and announced on May 17th during the final week of the 2021 WSIS Forum. We look forward to your participation and thank stakeholders for their contribution in shaping this year's WSIS Forum with ongoing commitment and support. We would also like to extend a warm thank you to our partners, without whom this forum would not be possible. Thank you, and we look forward to a successful WSIS Forum 2021.
Let me start by thanking ITU.
Please unmute yourself.
Let me start by thanking ITU for their excellent efforts in making this WSIS Forum again a very successful event under very challenging circumstances. I'm happy also to welcome all of you to this WSIS session on the global and regional implications of COVID-19 on e-commerce. This session is brought to you by UNCTAD, ITC, and UPU. We are the lead facilitators of the e-business action line of the WSIS. They are also partners of the eTrade for All initiative, which is the global partnership that has been assisting developing countries in their digital transformation over the past 5 years. And the eTrade for All partnership has now 32 partners, and among them are, for instance, the Economic Commission for Africa that we also have in the panel today. As you know, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformations in unprecedented and unforeseen ways. Just like we are connecting digitally here today, people and businesses around the world have had to, where possible, to rely on digital solutions to continue economic and social activities. Not surprisingly, the pandemic has triggered a surge also in e-commerce and digital trade. It was really against this background that a group of eTrade for All partners joined forces to produce a global review and 4 regional reports that offer together an early assessment of the impact of the pandemic on e-commerce around the world. This webinar today will provide a targeted dialogue to discuss the implications of the main findings of these reports at both the global and the regional levels. Our speakers will represent governments, businesses, international organizations, and will be sharing with us some of the barriers that we have been facing when trying to leverage digital solutions, what responses have been taken, and perhaps not least important, what can be done better to enhance global support to those countries that are the least equipped to manage digital transformation for dealing with the pandemic and beyond. So we will be opening the dialogue with a presentation of the main global findings from the eTrade for All Global Review to set the scene for the event. This will be followed by an interactive debate with a great lineup of panelists. Finally, we will close the session by answering some of the questions and comments that you may have posted on the various chat functions and Q&As. So let me, before starting, encourage all the attendees to take an active part in this dialogue. Feel free to use the chat function to share information that you think is relevant for the discussion or make comments on what we are saying. But if you want to pose a specific question to any of the speakers, I would encourage you to use the Q&A function, the questions and answers function. After the panel discussion, my colleague Cristina Colado Marti from ITC will read out some of the questions to allow the speakers to respond. We promise to do our best to cover the ground, but I will ask for your understanding if we are unable to address all the questions within the limited time that we have allotted to us. Okay, let's start by watching a short video on how the COVID-19 has changed the global trade and e-commerce landscape. And I will ask my colleague Victoria to share the short version of the video via her share screen. Victoria, please go ahead.
Welcome to the COVID-19 and e-commerce global review. Discover the key findings from the study conducted by UNTAD and eTrade for All partners on the impacts of COVID-19 on e-commerce and digital trade. E-commerce has been playing a growing role as part of the wider digital economy in global economic activity for the past decade. It also provides new ways of facilitating the Sustainable Development Goals, bringing both new challenges and new opportunities. In fact, despite the global recession, the pandemic has led to a further acceleration of digital transformation. First, let's look more closely at the global economic impact of the pandemic. The global economy shrank in 2020 by an estimated 4.3%, over 2.5 times more than during the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. International trade, including intercontinental and intra-regional e-commerce, has been negatively affected by the pandemic. UNCTAD's latest estimates suggest that global trade in goods fell by some 9% in 2020 and trade in services by 15%. However, as social distancing and restrictions on movement became the new normal, many businesses and consumers went digital, providing and purchasing more goods and services online. As a result, the pandemic has led to a further acceleration of digital transformation. The share of e-commerce in global retail trade is estimated to have surged from 14% in 2019 to about 17% in 2020. Further acceleration of digital transformation was also observed in other sectors such as teleworking, gaming, distance learning, digital entertainment, online conferencing. The pandemic has also benefited the world's leading digital platforms. Most solutions being used for e-commerce, teleworking, and cloud computing are provided by a relatively small number of large companies based mainly in China and the United States. Consumers in emerging economies have made the greatest shift to online shopping. Latin America's online marketplace Mercado Libre, for example, sold twice as many articles per day in the second quarter of 2020 compared with the same period the previous year. An African e-commerce platform Jumia reported a 50% jump in transactions during the first 6 months of 2020. In China, the online share of retail sales rose from 19.4% to 24.6% between August 2019 and August 2020. In Kazakhstan, the online share of retail sales increased from 5% in 2019 to 9.4% in 2020. In Thailand, downloads of shopping apps jumped 60% in the week between the imposition of partial lockdown and full emergency measures during March. The accelerated trend towards e-commerce seen during the pandemic is likely to be sustained during recovery. More than 50% of those interviewed in Okta's consumer survey in 9 countries said that they expected to continue shopping more often online after the pandemic. E-commerce platforms are therefore likely to retain many of the new market shares gained during the pandemic vis-à-vis offline markets. However, in many of the world's least developed countries, consumers and businesses aren't able to capitalize on the new e-commerce opportunities due to persistent bottlenecks and weaknesses in their eTrade readiness. Find out more about the impacts of COVID-19 on e-commerce and digital trade. Download the COVID-19 and e-commerce global review here.
Okay, welcome back. So I promise you that was the last video for this session. But it's sometimes very effective to use a video like this to just recap some of the main findings. Now, let's move to the interactive panelists and to discuss some of the implications of the findings that we just saw on the video. The bio and of all the speakers can be found on the event webpage. So I will just make very brief presentations of who we have here today in this panel. We have Jamie McLeod from the Economic Commission for Africa. He's a trade policy expert there. I apologize in advance for my pronunciation. Then we have Ms. Sochiata Touch, who is the co-founder and CEO at WeMall in Cambodia. And she's also a representative of the eTrade for Women community for Southeast Asia. We have Mr. Luis Cedeno, who is the e-commerce manager at the Ministry for Trade and Industry in Panama. And finally, we have Sifundu Chief Moyo, who is the Postmaster General of Zimbabwe Post. You're all extremely welcome to this session, and we look forward to learning from you as we go through the session. Let's start with some of the policy implications that we have to consider now, and focus first on Jamie and Sochiata. And let me start by asking both of you, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, what do you see as the main implemented actions by governments to sustain the economy, in particular through e-commerce? And please, could you share with us some good practices? Let's start with Jamie on this one.
Thank you very much, Torbjörn, and thank you for the interesting and probing question. I think it's one that's difficult to answer on behalf of a continent of 54 countries from very different kind of contexts and policy approaches. But really, despite that, we can see some kind of commonalities in those responses, and a couple of them I'd highlight are, for instance, most of these countries in Africa do not have the budgets that the richer world has for their responses to the crisis. Whereas, for instance, Japan, actually their stimulus has been calculated at 50% of their GDP. And you're lucky if you get 1 or 2% of GDP stimulus for many African countries. So really kind of actions that are a bit more kind of cost conscious and less expensive. And also ones where I think we have to appreciate that we're starting from a far less developed digital foundation in many countries. So for instance, in the richer world, much education is continued online. That is just not feasible or possible in a continent in which the percentage of individuals who use the internet is estimated to be about 30%. So an example here is, for instance, in Nigeria, a World Bank study looked at what had happened to schooling there in COVID, and only less than a third of schools were actually able to continue through COVID lockdown restrictions. For most, education just stopped, which is a tremendously difficult kind of outcome to end up in. But one of the other commonalities we have seen is the greater appreciation from policy makers as well as businesses of the opportunity of the digital economy and e-commerce. For many, this is in the past something that maybe wasn't top of the agenda or a major priority, but many policymakers, and in our research when we interviewed them, said this. One, for instance, from South Africa said, the digital economy was not a priority before COVID, but it has shown us the infrastructural deficit we lack, and that they've seen that countries that were more digitally ready were able to put in place better policy solutions because of that. And then so the second part of the question was about what are some of these good practices, the good policy practices. So here, let me share one that comes from the area that I work most closely in, which is trade. And that is the case of what has been called safe trade across borders in many African regions. And here, much of this isn't necessarily the priority being to digitalize things. It's about making sure that trade can happen in such a way that COVID is not going to be spread across borders. It's things, better tracking of lorry drivers, health checks, and things like that. But part of that has also involved greater automation of processes, the availability of digital payment solutions to reduce money physically transferring across hands. And that is quite a nice solution, because I think it's one that's sustainable and useful, in fact, even beyond COVID, when it hopefully becomes less of an issue for us. The other, and I'll conclude, main kind of policy reaction that I think I've been most impressed by is the collaborations between governments and businesses. And here, because often governments cannot always really understand exactly what are all the opportunities available to them. And so by working closely with, for instance, in East Africa, banks and telcos, they were able to waive the fees applied for mobile money products, which then resulted in an over 100% increase in especially small transaction values and less money changing hands physically. So those kind of working with business can come up with some of these creative solutions that I think can be really helpful.
Okay, that's really interesting, Jamie, and thanks for in such short time providing kind of a Pan-African perspective on these things. And I will go from your level and look at it from Suchiata's perspective here as a founder and CEO of an e-commerce company in one of the least developed countries in Cambodia. But I would still like you to reflect upon the policy developments that you have seen so far since the pandemic took hold. Suchiata, what's your perspective on this?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say thank you to ITC and UPU and UNTAC that organized this event, and thank for eTrade for Women as well, because I'm the member of eTrade for Women, and I learned a lot from this program. In terms of policy intervention in Cambodia, I think in 2019, the government adopted e-commerce law, and then in 2020, the government also approved the e-commerce strategy. And then during the lockdown, these few months in Cambodia, there's a widespread of COVID-19 in capital city of Phnom Penh. So then I can see the government and the private sector, they have a strong intervention. They join hands. They try to make sure that the food delivery delivered to the people in the lockdown area. And then I can see a lot of e-commerce player in the market, and then delivery also in the market as well. So to me, I can say that the COVID-19, even they have a negative impact to people, to society, but from the plus side, I can see that they're like something that pushed e-commerce or digital economy into another level. Based on our online resources, it found that e-commerce, it can generate 222 million US dollar in 2021, and it can increase to 300 million US dollar by 2035. So you can see the trend of e-commerce in Cambodia is quite, it can see that it has a significant increase. And the collaboration between public sector, private sector, and development partner, it have a strong link. So I can say from Cambodian side.
Okay, that's very interesting. So in both cases, we saw this need for this interaction between the private and public sector. Now, Cambodia is one of the least developed countries of the world. If you look ahead, what would you like to see in terms of additional actions taken to enable e-commerce to play a more positive role for long-term response and recovery in the case of Cambodia?
Yeah, but before we talking about recovery plan, maybe we can talk about the challenges that our people face at the moment.
Sure.
Even we have some good signs of e-commerce or digital economy in Cambodia, but there are some challenges that we found. First of all, it related to trust. I think it also found by your research as well. So trust of the customer, because most of the people, they still want to feel and touch. And then we try to introduce e-commerce. We have many e-commerce players. We have many delivery company, but the trust of the buyer, of the consumer, is still not yet at the point that we are thinking, we are expecting. So the trust is still an issue. And another one is about delivery, logistics. I refer to the logistics from one place to another place, especially from province to another province, from capital city to province, from capital city of Cambodia to other country. Like I also have some products bought and export to Japan, but there are some challenges of logistics arrangement. So logistics is another challenges that we are facing at the moment. And it's talking about supplier side, I mean vendor. So then they, because most of the vendor I work with is woman producer, woman run businesses. So most of them are digital illiterate. So it's difficult, you know, when I onboard them. So we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of effort to make sure that they know how to onboard their products in our website. They know how to write the content. Even sometimes they don't really know how to write their story of their product. So this is some kind of challenges that I personally face as the e-commerce player in Cambodia. And also looking at the asset to technology, asset to market, asset to finance. So all these kind of things is still not yet released from woman entrepreneur like mine. So there are some challenges. But when we talk about recovery plans, because in my personal level, we not just only e-commerce, just selling product and buying product on our web platform, but we also provide capacity building to our vendor. We also try to connect our vendor to different players in the country, outside of the country, especially for digital training, like for example, digital marketing. So we try our best to find those courses and to provide those kind of free of charge training to them to make sure that they are able to have more knowledge to do their job, to innovate their product, to have more good packaging for their products in the market. This is what we are trying to do. And of course, from the government side, I can say that from the Ministry of Commerce, they also have one program called eCam project. So eCam project is mainly to have the e-marketplace for SME. And then they also have many development partners pulling the money together for this project. And UNP is one player in the eCam project with the Ministry of Commerce. And I think that also a positive side from the public sector. And from private sector, we also try to promote, make sure that our e-commerce platform are user-friendly, and we build capacity of our vendors. So this is what I can say at the moment.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much. There seems to be a lot going on in Cambodia in this area. Sounds very positive, even if you're starting from a relatively low level. How do you relate to this description from Cambodia, Jamie? If you look upon these issues about the challenges and policy responses needed now moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Torbjörn. Of course, across most African countries, yeah, it's building really from a foundation that needs to be further developed before e-commerce can play such a vibrant role in the recovery. And here, I think I'd like to share 3 statistics that I think explain this, and then some of how the policies can respond to address those. The first one is that only 30% of Africans are roughly currently using the internet. Second is that only about 4% have credit cards, which are useful for making payments online. And thirdly, that about 16% can actually receive mail at home, which is important for the physical delivery of e-commerce goods. So this is, I think, of course, explains a market that needs to be further developed before e-commerce can become so vibrant. And some of the solutions there are, I think, particularly when it comes to low internet usage, it's often because of cost, poor reliability, and coverage. And there we need more competitive internet service providing markets in the African continent. About 13 are described by ITU as being fully monopolistic or only partially competitive. So really in that kind of environment, it's not going to, prices aren't going to fall and service quality isn't going to improve. So that is one area that I think we can focus on in terms of policy. Second is for online payments. I think here, it is a case for further liberalizing this market carefully so that teleco providers can offer a more mobile money kind of product. Here, there can sometimes be a bit of kickback from banks who feel like the telecos are encroaching on their space, but I think greater competition there as well is helpful. And the third one, with only 16% of Africans being able to receive delivery of e-commerce goods at home, I think we have the Zimbabwean Postmaster General who I think probably knows the answer to this better than I possibly could. But suggestions, structure, warehouses, and delivery systems with kind of new kind of private sector operators there can be a solution. However, these 3 policy responses, what they do is help to create an e-commerce marketplace. But I think we also need to be careful that we're not just helping to create e-commerce consumers in Africa. We also want to develop businesses that create value, that create jobs, this kind of thing. And so for that, beyond just creating the market, I think one of the main policy areas is investing in digital skills development. I think it'd be great to do that more formally. At the moment, you'll see, for instance, in Nairobi, where I am now, you can hire Android developers actually quite affordably. But the skills are a lot of times self-taught. You know, they describe themselves as hackers, and then it's more difficult to develop well-working applications and things that are sustainable in more informal skills.
And that's very interesting, and a very good point about the skills development. And of course, to strengthen entrepreneurship innovation among the smaller businesses in the digital sector. Okay, so we have now heard some perspectives from Africa and from Cambodia and Asia, and we will soon come back to Africa and speak to Mr. Moyo. But before that, let's travel in the other direction and visit Latin America, which is a region that has been very much affected by the pandemic, especially during 2020. And call on Mr. Luis Cedeño, who is, as I said, e-commerce manager at the Ministry for Trade and Industry in Panama. I would love to hear from you what you have done, and perhaps specifically on what kind of business support institutions that have tried to help small businesses sell online during the COVID-19 pandemic in your country.
Well, thank you very much. Well, since the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we started receiving a lot of consultations from small businesses, and some of them found themselves forced to migrate to the digital world for the first time after years and years of doing it in the traditional way. For some others, it was a situation of an opportunity that they saw to start a business for the first time, and they wanted to do it through e-commerce. But we noticed that for all of them, they had a problem of not knowing where to start, what the first steps to take. For example, some of them would think that in order to start an online business, the first thing they had to do was to open up an e-commerce account, only to find out that the banks cannot open an account unless you already have a website and a business up and running. On the other extreme of that, some of them started building their website, building the web channel, but they would concentrate so much and put so much emphasis on it that they would tend to forget or relegate the details about logistics, and then they would find themselves with a web channel, but not knowing how to deliver, and discovering late that the importance of logistics, how important details like packaging is, because it has an impact on costs, and it also has an impact on the overall customer satisfaction. So upon realizing that, I'd say the second half of 2020 was spent at coordinating and putting together webinars and seminars with both local and international speakers in various topics, anything from how to start a business to even cybersecurity. And also, I have to say, the legal aspects of e-commerce, because e-commerce laws tend to be a little bit confusing for some people. So we spent almost 6 months of 2020 doing that. And from that, learning from that, we have now reached out to other organizations outside of Panama to continue doing developing programs like that. We are now about to begin a mentoring program directed to people who want to export from Panama through e-commerce.
Okay, so but would you say that some of the enterprises then that you got in touch with during 2020 would not have taken this step had it not been for the pandemic?
Oh, for sure, for sure. A lot of people, Panama has a very quite a young population, but there are many people that have been doing business for years, and successful businesses, small and medium, and they were fine with the traditional way of doing things. But they may have had a website that was not transactional, but with the pandemic, they were forced to migrate to the digital world.
So even though Panama is compared to many of the least developed countries of the world, perhaps more developed, you're facing very similar challenges, or the companies are facing similar challenges. There are payments issues, there are logistical issues, there are legal issues, there are skills issues, and perhaps also access to finance then. So, but you mentioned that you had developed certain mentoring programs here. Could you say a little bit more of what kind of programs to develop skills that have proven to be more successful than others in terms of impact?
Well, what I said was that we are about to launch a program because since the pandemic, we reach out to other organizations outside of Panama to help us develop a program directed to people who want to export. And that's about to begin in a couple of months. But experience that we have had is through ITC. We implemented a mentoring program since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It is a program that was directed to women who make handmade products. And yeah, it's been a great experience because for them, they have discovered, they thought they knew what e-commerce implied, but they have discovered that there are many aspects of how to compete in the online world that is very different from the traditional way of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
For example, skills like learning about keywords and keyword research, that's almost a science, and they're now in the final phase learning about analytics and online marketing, which is also different from how you compete in the traditional way. Especially the importance of developing good content. Content is something that you compete with in the online world. Mm. So yeah, they have discovered a new world, so to speak, throughout this mentoring program.
Yeah, very fascinating. And I'm happy that you mentioned ITC, because ITC is one of the co-organizers of these sessions and is very active specifically on helping small businesses to become more successful internationally, either through e-commerce or through other means. And I'm happy that you make reference to that. And I was also happy to hear Sociata mentioning the eTrade for Women initiative. And I think this is kind of the idea with us coming together as international organizations to show how we can support member states and stakeholders in the member states in various ways to address the multiple challenges that we're facing. And our collaboration with the UNECA and also with ECLAC-CEPAL in Latin America has been very important in this context. The third organizer of this session is the Universal Postal Union. And they deal with several of the challenges that arise in the context of e-commerce. And one is, of course, linked to how to leverage the postal system for e-commerce. And I'm very happy that we have Sifundo Chief Moyo, the Postmaster General of Zimbabwe Post, with us today. And I know that the Post in Zimbabwe is right now undergoing a major digital transformation program. So you're right in the middle of this digital transformation process that we're talking about all the time. Could I ask you to share with us a little bit how the Post Office in Zimbabwe has been assisting small businesses in your country to overcome the effects of COVID-19 and the changes in the environment as a result?
Thank you very much, Fredrickson, for that opportunity and that important question. And may I take this opportunity to thank UCTAD, UPU, and ITC for organizing this very useful discussion. Yes, the Post Office in Zimbabwe is very active in ensuring that e-commerce
Mr. Moyo,
thrives, you know, with no one had planned for it, but is staying at home. But staying at home, yes.
Yes, sorry for interrupting you. May I suggest actually that you switch off the video, because we had some connection issues to you. We were losing you a bit, so I hope we will hear you better.
Okay, thank you very much. I've done that. I was saying that the post office is playing a big role in ensuring that e-commerce thrives in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, which had literally paralyzed operations in the country. And the post office is an essential services provider. And Zimpost is an organization that has positioned itself to be able to operate during these difficult times. To begin with, we have a shop on the Zimbabwe Post, which is sitting on the UPU and ensures that customer information cannot be tampered with, which is a very important prerequisite for one to offer an e-shop. So what we have been doing with MSMEs is that we have provided the infrastructure where they can place their products for them to be visible locally, internationally, and domestic, and globally. And we also have been assisting them to access global markets, not to mention the fact that once they have lodged their items with Zimpost, we then facilitate by moving their goods to their customers, even across borders, which means also facilitating customs clearance issues. And we realize that there is need for capacity strengthening of MSMEs, and we are organizing them. It's a journey. We have not yet arrived, but we are organizing that they get training on a number of aspects that include business management, value addition, and also procurement compliance, together with export trade. So there is a lot that the post office is doing to promote the activities of SMEs during this difficult period.
Were there any challenges that you came across in having to adapt now to this situation and in supporting services to small businesses in this context?
Oh yes, we are operating in an environment which is defined as new normal, a new normal. First of all, e-commerce, online shopping was there before, but very few people were interested in it. And now you get a situation where people may not have been trusting buying things online, and later on believe that if they sell things online, they'll get their money. We had to overcome those issues. And most importantly, we have been able to find ways of getting the stuff that SMEs produce to the markets, whether local or international. Of course, we have had challenges during the first days of the pandemic, where airlines were grounded and items could not out of the country. But as the situation improved, we have been able to make sure that we effectively connect the SMEs to their markets. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much. And I think what this shows is that we have all been on a steep learning curve during the past year or so during the pandemic. We have, as international organizations, we have had to adapt as individuals, government organizations, as post offices, and also as entrepreneurs and business leaders, we have had to adapt. And what you pointed out about the grounding of the airlines, I know that has had a particular impact on small goods and parcels that have been shipped through the postal system, because you rely often on the passenger aircraft for this. And we saw that very strongly in the report coming out from Latin America, where the pandemic led to a dramatic drop in these kind of small parcels, low value shipments of packages through the postal system. But I understand from another webinar I participated in about a week ago with the UPU that there were quick arrangements to find new collaborations here between UPU and other players in the market. We are now around 15 minutes from the end of this session, so I would like to check with Christina if we have had any questions in the chat or especially in the question and answers.
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks a lot for this interesting discussion that we have had from different angles. That is the most enriching part out of this. We have two questions. There is one question addressed at Mr. Sifundo, and it's, I mean, you already answered part of it, but I think the question is more focused towards a long-term strategy. And the question is, how has COVID-19 impacted your digital development strategies for the postal sector? How are you going to modify this and to comply with the new statutes?
Mr. Sifundo, would you like to respond directly?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. It's a question. Post office is for a long time, and Zimpost had already embarked on a journey to digitalize its operations. What it did was it digitalized so that our services, and what this means is that customers, we are trying transactions offsite, virtual transactions, without necessarily having.
I can't hear the answers correctly. I don't know if it's just me.
No, it's not just you.
No, you're not the connection. Okay.
Sifundo, I'm really sorry, but the connection is breaking.
Strategy entity that can. Okay, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it goes and it comes and
Hello,
goes all the time.
Okay, let me just try and summarize in a sentence and say that we are digitalizing so that customers can access our products on the electronic as well as the mobile platforms without having to physically come to the post office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Just to, I mean, what we just experienced now is another illustration that we cannot just take for granted that it would always work in the digital world. And this points to the need also to strengthen especially the countries that are coming now from the behind to enter the digital economy, to strengthen the connectivity situation, but also, of course, all the other aspects to participate in the e-commerce and digital economy. Is there any other question, Christina?
Yes, we have another question also related to the postal services and logistics. So it's how can we deal with challenges in e-commerce, especially in Africa, when we face delays? And I think this question could be answered by many of you. Like, what's your experience with delays? How have you innovated in overcoming these challenges?
Let's go to Jamie first and see what came out in their analysis for the COVID report.
Yeah, no, thank you. Although I may myself draw an answer from the report on Latin America, because I think it's quite an interesting response. But it was that during the crisis, as Torbjörn mentioned, international e-commerce slowed down tremendously, but that was replaced by local e-commerce. So sometimes if the issues are, slowdowns or delays or supply chain disruptions internationally, sourcing locally can be a good solution. In some of our research, it was in July last year, where we surveyed businesses across the continent. Many of them had shortened their supply chains and instead sourced from a local or regional alternatives. So I think that's quite a nice way that helps also generate greater business within the continent as well. In the case of
What about in Cambodia? What role has the Post played in the past year? Sushata.
Yes, thanks for this question. In Cambodia, even we have some delays of our delivery, but we try to find partner. We try to do some kind of strategic partnership. Even in local player, we also try to collaborate. Like in a lockdown area, especially recently, we have a lockdown area like a red zone, yellow zone, and other zones. So then there are some restrictions that delivery man cannot get in. So then delivery company try to work out with public sector, with authority, and also with other players. So then they can pass one to another one. So then it's about collaboration and building a partnership. Even with the product that we export to other countries, we also try to connect to different players and consolidate the products together. So then it saves cost and also it saves resources as well from the delivery company. So that's what we have done in Cambodia.
But you're experiencing that the postal office in Cambodia is also adapting now to the growth of the e-commerce?
Yes, for the post office, they also have some changes, but in terms of responsiveness, it's not yet to the expectation of the consumer. Because few months ago, I have a chance to talk to Minister of the Ministry of Post and Communication. They organize public consultation to adopt the e-government master plan. And then I raised a question about post office role. What can be changed to adopt to the increased trend of e-commerce? So then he said that there's another section to talk about that one. It's still a long way to go, but at least there's some improvement at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Let's also check in with Panama here. What role has the postal system played in your case in supporting the small businesses? You need to unmute, please.
Okay, now, yeah, as I was saying, in the case of Panama, the postal offices have realized that they now have to modernize their operations. They are now in a project where they are developing infrastructure to help e-commerce grow within the free zone of Panama. They need to adapt their systems, their servers, and some interface to connect with other businesses. So I would say that that's the impact that the COVID has had on them. They have accelerated this process, but it's still in the beginning phase, I would say. So they rely a lot for international export. They rely a lot on the national airline of the private sector. So we have a challenge there.
Yeah. No, so we have lots of challenges, I think, all around here, and but what could be good with this, a silver lining sort of the tremendous suffering that we have had during the pandemic, in many ways, is that we have got more attention to the challenges, and we also perhaps realize better that we need to do something about it. A few words here, perhaps, about this eTrade for All initiative that we set up 5 years ago with 14 partners. We are now 32, and it's all about connecting the dots, as we say, and this is I think what we have illustrated here in this session We need to join forces between the different stakeholders within countries. We cannot do this only by governments. We cannot do it only in the private sector. We need also to interact with the civil society, because the consumers are a very important stakeholder in this development. We also cannot do it only nationally. I think most developing countries around the world, they recognize that there are limitations to what can be done totally on your own. I think the example from Panama was very illustrative. You have reached out now to get other stakeholders to contribute to your learning process and to develop new programs. You work with international organizations. And this is, of course, our experience from UNCTAD as well. And I think from ECA throughout Africa, etc. But we, as international organizations, also need to work better together. And that's what we're trying to do with this effort to assess preliminarily what the impact has been on e-commerce from COVID-19. And unfortunately, we are not out of the pandemic yet. A lot of countries are facing the highest number of cases ever, all still in May. So we will still need to work with all these issues during the pandemic. And at some stage, I hope we will be able to see the end of the tunnel, and that we will then also be slightly better prepared for dealing with e-commerce and the digital economy. I would like to just go one final round in the among the panelists to see if you would like to share a final reflection or a comment before we close the session. And let me go back to the first of the panelists, to Jamie. Anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Torbjörn. I think one thing I would like to share is that we often think about designing policies and regulations for the e-commerce sector, but we need to be careful when we do so. And this comes back to what we've discussed a lot about collaboration, identifying with private sector and governments what works. But also there can be a case of badly imposed regulations, ones that come in prematurely and can stifle innovation and an effective sector there. So I think as well as introducing new policies, we need to be careful about when we do so. And that comes from the kind of collaboration you've been talking about.
Thank you. Excellent advice. Suchata, what would you like to bring to the end?
Yeah, I also have 3 points, but before I go to those 3 points, because recently there's a report just released from international organization called Oxfam. They said that 800 billion total lost income from women. I mean, a lot of women lost their income. So then talking about e-commerce, talking about cross-border trade, so I would like to draw attention to development partner, public sector, or even private sector to take more attention to women entrepreneur, as well as women as the buyer or the supplier. So these are one things that I would like to highlight in this discussion. And again, there are 3 main points. It's about collection, coordination, and collaboration. So collection, what I want to say is about collection of talent, collection of resources, and then coordination is to coordinate all the key players to join hands, to join force to make a big impact for the better world. And of course, collaboration, because I can see a lot. I also the freelance consultant for women entrepreneurship and digitalization. A lot of development program, a lot of public sector program, and private sector also somehow there still need to be more collaborated. Yes. So these are main 3 C that I want to share during our discussions.
I would love to subscribe to all 3. Thank you so much, Suchata. Luis, any final comment from you?
Well, for all the SMEs out there that might be listening or watching this podcast, I would like to say that if you're already in e-commerce and have already made that transition, don't make the mistake of thinking that you know it all. You have to keep on learning and investigating and getting updated because technology never stops growing and evolving. And if you haven't, then I would invite you to do it. To make use of the internet. It is very easy and free nowadays to learn. There are many webinars and seminars that you can find online in all languages, and even with instant translation that you can benefit from. So learning about technology, getting involved with it, and being updated, it's very important for any business owner today.
Thank you very much. Very wise advice. Let's hope also that we can hear a final comment from Sifundo from Zimbabwe. I hope the connection will work.
Thank you very much. I hope you are hearing me this time around. Yes, my parting shots are that the post office has a very important role in trade facilitation for SMEs, and we can only do it with support from other stakeholders like the monetary authorities, the tax authorities, and central government, as well as the retailers. And we would want to play our role to develop the SMEs and make sure that they get onto the e-commerce bandwagon and they can survive in the new normal that is being detected upon them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This time we heard you loud and clear. Let me thank my co-moderator, Christina. Let me thank all the panelists for excellent contributions to the discussion. And also thank you all for attending this WSIS session on the global and regional implications of COVID-19 on e-commerce, co-organized by UNCTAD, ITC, and UPU. I would like to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or perhaps even good night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for having attended. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, WSIS, for organizing this. Bye.
Thank you very much. Good day to you.